Hi, this is Darren with Shonnard's Nursery. Now that you've got your tomato in the ground, I wanted to give you a few tips to make the most of growing your tomato this summer. Let's talk about cages and covers. You should have your cover on your tomato in the early part of the season. It generates some extra heat, and they appreciate that. Eventually, it can get too hot for them. If your cover is ventilated, like our cover is here, you can leave them on pretty well until they outgrow the cover. If your cover is not ventilated, you need to pay attention to the temperatures. Temperatures inside that cover above 110 can significantly impact your tomato growth. When your tomato is reaching near the top of the cage or pushing on the outside edges of the cover, or when it's getting significantly warm out, you can take your cover off. If you're careful, you can reuse your covers year over year, and you can find your tomato inside. Watering is a chronic question we get about tomato growth, and there's no one answer. Every soil and situation is somewhat different. The key with successful tomato growing is to water thoroughly and deeply when you water, and water before they get to the point where the tips of the branches are beginning to wilt. In a native soil situation, this might be watering once or twice a week. In a pot, this might be watering every day or even twice a day during extreme weather. So tune your watering to your specific situation. Of course, you provided fertilizer and lime to your plant at planting. That's an important step, but that's not enough nutrition to completely get your tomato through the long growing season. So you're going to need to apply some additional nutrition. Apply a granular organic fertilizer and rake it lightly into the soil underneath the plant. This means lifting back the cover if you have a soil cover on and applying it to the soil surface. It's also important to provide some additional lime. Calcium lime, not a dolomitic lime, calcium carbonate. If your tomatoes don't have enough lime, the bottom end of the fruit, where the flower normally sits, will begin to discolor and decay. They call that blossom end blight, and blossom end blight is simply a calcium deficiency. Providing adequate calcium throughout the entire growing season, particularly as they begin to flower and fruit, is critical for tomato performance. I like to time fertilizing in lime for the second application around the 4th of July. It's an easy date to remember, and it's about halfway through the growing season. If your plant is not growing vigorously enough, you're worried about its development, you can also apply liquid organic fertilizers and apply them directly to the leaves of the plant to speed up growth. While pruning is not essential for growing tomatoes, it can increase the disease resilience, improve the fruit size, and also speed up the ripening process. So we're going to talk a little bit about pruning tomatoes. To improve disease resistance, it's important to have good air circulation through the upper canopy of the plant, and also to avoid splash from the soil onto the foliage. So the first step in pruning tomatoes is to carefully remove foliage below about 12 inches up the stem. This will help improve the air circulation by giving some flow through, and it will dramatically reduce the amount of water splash from the soil up onto the plant. And that applies to all tomato plants. Determinate tomato plants, that's probably all you'll want to do. Indeterminate or vining tomato plants can be enhanced with some additional pruning. And indeterminate plants put secondary growth out from the leaf axis. So you have a leaf here, and you have a new vine starting right where that leaf comes out of the main stem. That vine will continue to grow and get larger and larger and larger. It's okay to let some of those develop. In fact, it's important for good productivity. But you can dramatically improve your tomato by removing some of that growth to thin out that upper canopy and to avoid overgrowth on the top. When you catch them small like this, you can simply literally pinch them out by hand like that. On the other hand, if you've let them go a little too long and they've gotten viney and they're as big around as this leaf stem is, you'd be better served to actually carefully prune them out. Don't get carried away with thinning. If you thin 20% of the plant, that's probably sufficient for improving your production. If you get too thin, you don't have enough leaves to support the ripening fruit, and you can have such an insufficient leaf cover that you can actually get sun scald. Tomatoes like sun, but too much is too much. One additional point about pruning is that at the end of the season on indeterminate varieties, there's often a lot of unripe and not ripening fruit, and that can be frustrating. You can enhance the ripening of that fruit, speed up the process by topping your tomato plant late in the summer. If you calculate your estimated first frost or first significant major rainfall event, for us in the Willamette Valley, that's usually early October, and then you move back about 3 to 4 weeks, so that puts us in basically first part of September. If you top all those long vegetative vines that are coming out the top of your plant, all the fruit that's down underneath will suddenly be focused on ripening, and you can get a lot more of that fruit ripened before the weather kicks in and you lose the plants. Tomatoes are normally very successful plants to grow. They are subject to some disease and insect problems. It's a complicated topic, too complicated for a short video, but it's worth mentioning that you might see leaf spots, you might see discolored stems, shriveling growth, or other distorted growth. To well address those problems, it's best to take a sample to somebody who knows. Like your local garden center should have somebody who can help you with identifying and treating any tomato problems you run into.